We're taking the time to be with our friends, our family, and enjoy the holiday season, take a little bit of a break, get some rest. So guess what? We're going to be giving you guys some of our favorite episodes and doing a couple rebroadcasts as we get ready to bring all of our new content to you first of the year. So this particular show is one of my personal favorites. I hope that you enjoy it. You guys, please have a magical end of year, a great holiday. Spend the time with your family. Enjoy the program, and we will see you very, very soon. Talk to you later. God bless. Bye.
All right. Welcome, everyone. It is time again for another episode of Contagious Leadership, and this is our lunch talk portion of our Contagious Leadership series. I want to welcome again our co-host, Lorianne. Lorianne, welcome back again.
Hey, everybody. Excited. Welcome back from vacation there, you.
Yeah, same with you, right? Except you actually made it on the show. And
yes.
Congratulations on a really successful program last week while I was out at South Dakota in the Black Hills. Anyways, it is August 18th. It is 1:01 p.m., the year of our Lord, 2022. And we have an amazing program lined up for you today as we speak with our guest, Luke Layman. And I hope I said his last name correctly. I actually didn't even ask. But we're talking about how to live a life of intention. And we're going to talk how his story and where he came from and where he's brought himself today and how he's going to be able to share some things with you. Get some pens, get a piece of paper, however you want to do it. Papers or pen. But anyways, get ready. We got some great stuff coming for you. I can't wait to introduce him to you. We're going to be right back in a few seconds. Donnie? All right, and let's welcome to the table here. And here we go. All right.
There he is.
There he is. Luke, welcome so much again. I am really excited that you're here. Thank you very much. So I want to kind of jump into this, and Lorianne introduced you to us, and I'm so grateful for that. And I've read your bio, and I've got some great stuff here I want to get into. But before we get too far, I would love to give you about 5 minutes. Why don't you share your story with our audience and let them know who you are and where you come from and why you are in the place you are today.
Well, let's not take 5 minutes because it's certainly not about me today. We'll see if we can drop some power for your audience today. The short story from my background is I spent about a dozen years as a fighter pilot in the Air Force, and then I've spent the rest of my career as an entrepreneur. I'm invested across all kinds of sectors from radio frequency manufacturing to hospitality. And I lead a aerospace and defense company that was actually just selected second year in a row for the Inc. 5000. So we're excited to continue our growth there. But from where we're going to go today is really about how do we grow as leaders and entrepreneurs, and how do we make the changes for those rapid growth and high growth movements that we want to make inside our own life. So we're going to get real deep into it. I'm an open book. I'm excited to share. We'll talk a little bit about flying stories to make it fun today, but it's all about making some big impact for the listeners.
Love it. Awesome. Well, thank you. So, Luke, you talk about living an intentional alignment, a life of intentional alignment. So, how did your experience and your life in general bring you to this place where you found the need to help others have intentional alignment? I think that's important because for myself, I know I'm here in this place because I found not a niche to fill. It was a passion. Just like we've talked with Lori and I have talked a lot about this with each other, is when we are authentic in something we care about, it can come from good, it comes from bad, it can come from many situations, but it becomes a purpose-driven aspect in our life, and it has passion and authenticity to it, and you feel very authentic in what you care about. How did that get here, and why the intentional alignment?
Well, it starts when you lose yourself. And there's a lot of what I talk about in my podcast or when I'm engaging with other entrepreneurs is about being in alignment with your values. And for me, as a fighter pilot, you made an identity shift when you became a fighter pilot. You were embodied by a culture in a group of individuals who lifted you up and created a new identity. So when you've heard about basic training and they break you down and they give you a new identity, you become this person and you embody the values and the culture. And my transition out of the military, as I left flying jets to become an entrepreneur, I lost that identity, that group of people that I hung out with, a common mission, a higher calling, something that was more powerful than what I was. And I got lost and didn't know where to go find it. And what I struggled with was that entrepreneurial journeys didn't fill or scratch the itch that I had from flying jets. So I did like everybody else does. You start to chase your purpose, you chase your why, reading the Simon Sinek Find Your Why stuff. And it's a good start, but really getting crystal clear about your values alignment and how you identify as a person and how you show up in the world. So the story ends with me being about 30 pounds overweight, chasing wealth. And when I found that I was chasing wealth, I found myself at the dinner table, disconnected from a wife who wanted my attention, from a young daughter and a son on the way who needed a dad to show up in a different manner. And the intentional alignment component is very simple. It's just health, wealth, and relationships, and making sure that you have a balance inside your life so that one doesn't take over any of the other parts.
As an entrepreneur, as a business owner, this is something that obviously resonates very closely to me, and many people in leadership feel this. I believe there is a fine line between an intrapreneur and an entrepreneur, and I believe the word entrepreneur in the last few years has been a bit overused, and so I don't want to say it to use a coin word, but there's a reality to what an entrepreneur is. And there's a lot of challenges that we face and a lot of fear that we face in that process. And so by no means are we just speaking to people who create a business. And I want to make that clear because Luke, I believe very much you feel the same way. That entrepreneur has the same goal in mind and has the same ability to get caught in creating and building something bigger than themselves and trying to chase something to fill what seems to be an empty void. And I don't think many of us understand that until we've gotten too far down the process where we realized it was never closed. We were missing something. And I think a lot of that comes from fear of missing out in some area. And we talked a little bit about this. So I'd like you to move into that if you can. You had talked about your approach towards fear and an acronym that you've built for that. Would you share that with us?
Well, sure. Fear is something that is from an ego-driven person. It's something that we don't want to talk about. We want to act fearless, and especially for men, we're raised in a culture where you should be without fear, and it's just not true. We all live in fear, and frankly, from a brain science standpoint, fear does a lot to our nervous system, the way we regulate ourselves. It keeps us safe, the way that our brain responds in our amygdala, and keeps our prefrontal cortex moving, so we're solving problems. But fear, so what is fear? And the first definition, what I'll tell you is fear for me is a future expectation of an adverse result. And then the caveat comes is that it's independent of its relative likelihood of occurrence. So what does that mean? You walk into a parking garage, you get scared because you feel like there's some nervous energy there. That's fear showing up independent of the relative likelihood of you getting jumped, your car getting stolen, but you're present to that fear. And in entrepreneurial world or intrapreneurial world, which Rigo, I love that word. I I teach, coach, mentor. I love building entrepreneurs inside your business. I think that from an entrepreneur standpoint, you get the opportunity to reap more benefit because you have higher risk. But that doesn't mean that entrepreneurs or leaders, whether you're an equity holder, whether or not you're profit incentivized, whatever it is, you still bear that risk and you bear that heaviness. So what do we do with it? Now, and here's how I got into that. A very great mentor of mine said, you project upon others the things that you fear most. And Rigo, I'm like, that's not true, because I'm afraid of heights. And I don't care if Lorianne is afraid of heights. I'm not projecting anything about my fear of heights on anyone else. And I know that you're chuckling because you're like, Luke, how did you fly jets at 100 feet above the ground?
I get it. Listen, I'm afraid of heights.
Yeah.
And for a decade, I climbed these things.
That's crazy. I would not do that. I would have a heart attack and I'd jump out of my skin. I can fly at 100 feet above the ground on an attack run, pop, roll inverted, pull 4 Gs, point at the ground and shoot, but I can't stand on a ladder 12 feet in the air.
Isn't that crazy?
All right. So we're learning something personal about Luke too.
Yeah. Some significant vulnerability there. So I'll answer the question, Lori, and then we'll dig there a little bit. So fear, what is fear? And you say, if you're projecting upon someone else, what I found was that people have 2 fears. And it's the root of everything that you're talking about. The first, the fear of inadequacy, and the second is the fear of judgment. And then when I started to figure out those 2 things, now I figured out where my projection came. Because when I felt inadequate, I projected that upon others. When I felt as though something I was going to do would result in my judgment, I projected that upon someone else. And in all of high success and high growth, entrepreneurship, leadership, is that you can only get in your environment what you're willing to change on the inside. And what you see on the outside is nothing more than a reflection in a mirror showing up for what's on the inside.
100%, Luke. And
Lori, I'm gonna pass this one to you because there's a lot there to unpack. That was awesome.
Yeah, and I love how you just worded that. But here's the thing. I mean, and I think most of us, and well, let me just start back with I love the leaders set the tone. They set the tone for their organization, for those that are around them. But how do you, because I think that this is the key thing for everybody that's watching this, is like when you realize that you've got this fear, like how do you get over that stumbling block, that wall that's right there for you so that you can move past that, recognizing your own fear, but being able to like, how do I change this so that the people that are around you actually feel safe and also like can follow your guidance, your vision? What would you say to those people?
I love that. Thanks for teeing that up. Here's what I would say. I'll say it in one sentence, a single sentence that you can ask yourself to completely shift out of that fear. The first is realizing that the stigma of fear is bullshit. You can be in fear. Yeah. You can have fear. You can be scared of the results, which are different. That's an emotion and a feeling, which is a different discussion. But being in fear, the first step for you to understand is that a negative emotional response is fine. It serves a purpose. It has a positive intention of why it's there. So if you walk into the parking garage and you feel fear, it has a positive intention of you protecting your safety. Mm-hmm. So the problem becomes where you can't point to the positive intention behind it. So it shows up and it manifests through being triggered. And I will tell you, Lorianne, you know this about me, is that my children, God love them, 8 and 6 years old, trigger me. And you go, why is that happening? Why am I getting frustrated? For me, the weakness exists in entropy and chaos. So when there are things that are chaotic around me, I seek to return order and discipline to that chaotic environment. So the trigger is the first introduction into that negative emotional response. So what do you do with it? You shorten it. If you can find the shortest path back to a positive emotional state, you open your aperture. And that's the challenge, is that when we get into a negative emotional response, we close what we can see as possible for us. Mm-hmm. And if you stay there, if you stay in the negativity, If you stay in the expectation of fear or failure or frustration, your world stays small. So the very first thing that I do anytime that I get into it is I say, is this a me thing or a you thing? And I want to figure out where I am accepting responsibility for what I own. And when I can get to the place that I own everything, where it's all my fault, where I am fully at cause for everything in my environment, then I can move forward and begin to control those things. So is it a me thing or a you thing? And the sooner that I can move it back to being fully at cause in my world, now I can control the outcomes.
I love that.
Luke, excuse me, I got a question for you, and I love what you just said. I was speaking with a mentor of mine here a few weeks ago, and he was helping me understand something that I thought was really great, and I think you would resonate well with this. And that was understanding responsibility and fault. Because I think in some cases and in some instances, without the right maturity and understanding, we could get stuck in areas that will not allow us to grow past because we're taking ownership, but we're doing it in a way where we're only doing it by fault versus ownership and responsibility. So if something was to catastrophically happen to my studio, it would be in my responsibility to have the right insurance or the right backup in order to continue doing our program. It wouldn't necessarily be my fault if it was a weather related, but it would be my responsibility. Do you see this in the time that you work with leaders, that you work with groups where you have to help them understand that we need to take accountability and responsibility for all the things in our life? Not always our fault, but we have a element in the choices that we make or do not make that still require us to take full ownership and full responsibility.
So a lot of linguistics associated with that. And I love the study of linguistics. The root of what I consider to be the way that I grow businesses, the way that I talk about the entrepreneurial accelerator framework. And that's my cup of tea. Whether you're an entrepreneur, doesn't matter. I grow businesses the same way, service-based businesses. That's what I invest my money and my time into. So I love the study of linguistics. I look at brain science, I look at high performance leadership, and I look at business strategy and tactics, and they don't exist one without the other. So when we talk about linguistics and we look at the word choice where we say responsibility or fault, what that comes back down to me is the other word that you used is accountability. And I actually don't need to get to the point of responsibility or fault because I know that I am truly at cause for all in my environment. I live in Charleston, South Carolina. There's a beautiful water body out there right there, but I put myself here today, which means that if I walk out tomorrow and get hit by a car, yes, there was a drunk driver that was at fault, but the choice was mine. And when you come all the way back out and you continue to zoom out, when you can operate from the place of being at cause, now you can begin to control the future. If I'm operating at effect, if I'm operating as a recipient of the circumstances inside my environment, I continually respond and I'm always reactive. So the way that we move into that proactive standpoint as leaders is that we become at cause. So we take that accountability. And as I teach and coach and mentor, one of the challenges is dealing with blame and shame. Everybody likes to point fingers when they get inside a boardroom and they go, yeah, that wasn't a me thing. I didn't have that information. Communication was poor. Accountability was poor. But can you imagine a situation where Lorianne and Rigo and I are sitting around the table and each of us are taking full accountability for what we did to get in that situation? Because now we start to solve for the outcome instead of trying to put blame on how we got there.
Yeah. The pointing of the finger game.
Yeah, I love this.
Yeah. So Luke, when you're working with clients, how do you get them to get into that habit, that mindset of constantly like, increase the aperture. Let's look at things from a higher point of view instead of, but this was my little portion that I was supposed to do. How do you get people to like think differently like that?
Okay, my insider baseball, Lorianne, secrets there. So, how do we do that? It's not a secret. It's not a secret at all. One of the easiest tools, and so now we're getting into tactics. In my leadership, when I want to encourage or someone else to think outside of the box, which Rigo, we could talk about thinking outside the box. When people say, can you think outside the box? Let's at least define the box so we know what we're trying to get out of, and let's figure out how we do that. But the secret that I use, Lorianne, is actually, it comes from a counseling technique. It's therapy. Is I allow someone to take a third person view of the situation, and it becomes non-judgmental, and it takes away the blame and the shame. So blame and shame are two of my favorite words. I love the study of it. I love looking at therapy because I think it's important for us to be leader coaches. Blame happens when you project it. Shame happens when you feel it. Same feeling, different emotional response. The emotional response can show up as anger or frustration, sadness, disappointment. But the way that I help someone out there is I take the blame and the shame all the way out of it. I take a second or third person approach view of that. So one of the ways I can do that in a second person is I can move you as the person left or right along the timeline. So then I would say to you, Lorianne, how might have you solved that 10 years your junior? So if you didn't know the things that you knew today, how might you have solved that? And then I move you right on the timeline and I say, let's just imagine a future version of Lorianne. And I want you to think about if you had all the knowledge and all the skills and all the attitudes and all the resources to be able to solve that problem, how might you solve it if you were trained a little bit better, if you were in a better emotional state, if you expected a more positive outcome? But I take the villainization out of it. It's not you versus me anymore. It's you versus you. And I'm asking you to think creatively about what the outcome may be. So we can kind of get into it. There's some fighter pilot stuff that we do. There's some techniques that we do to drive accountability that focuses on the quality of the decisions instead of the outcomes. But that's the secret is I let you take a second or third person view so that you don't have to feel the blame or the shame.
So would you share something? Would you share one of those? And Lori, I'm going to give it back to you because it sounds like you have a question, but when we get back, would you share one of those exercises with us?
Yeah,
happy to do so.
Awesome.
Actually, I didn't really have a question. I had more of a comment. I just wanted to comment on that whole approach. Is like Luke. What I'm hearing you say is like, you're really taking out that emotion. You're taking out, like the shame and the blame, which is great. And then it's like you're letting people like almost come from a not so much like this higher point of view, but like more empowered. Like, hey, 10 years ago, how could this, like, what could you have done almost like to prepare for this or learn from this? Or like, what do you wish that you had been trained in? And then that future, and then just like moving people like into the future of like 10 years from today, or even 6 months from today, how are you going to look back on this? Like, how would you look back on this to change this particular situation? I just feel like that empowers the leaders and the people that you're working with.
Yeah, so Rigo, I'll come back and we'll answer that. We'll talk about some debrief techniques that we use inside the fighter pilot culture that have some very germane applications to the way that we lead and the way that we demonstrate accountability. And I'll teach that here in just a moment. But Lorianne, to what you're talking about is that we have to realize that, again, everything is positively intended. If you have a crackhead that goes out there and steals a lawnmower to buy drugs, it still has a positive intention. The positive intention is just safety rooted. He and I, or she and I, just don't share the frame because we have a different understanding. Our box looks different. Our worldview looks different, but it still has positive intention. So when we look to move people as leaders, we look to move them from problems to outcomes. We look to move them from a view of the world that's impossibility driven to that as if it's already occurred, as if it's already happened in the future, at the exact mechanism that we want to get into it. So the very first thing that I do is I shift it to an outcome frame. And I shift it to a future version that's already happened for us. And then we begin to solve backwards from that. So Rigo, to answer your question though, when we debrief, so a couple of things about the fighter pilot culture that people don't likely understand. When I would fly for about 2 hours. Some other fighter aircraft fly for less, 45 minutes. But I would still spend an entire 8-hour day on that one sortie. And it usually started about 5 o'clock in the morning. You would come, prepare, brief, plan. You would go execute the flight, and then you would come back and debrief. And the secret happens in the debrief.
Yep.
The problem that we have in business is that we're operating too fast, under too much constraint, and we don't take the time to slow down.
I want you to say that again really clear.
Yeah, so in an hour we can power through a lot of stuff, but let's get focused on this.
Right
When
there,
we
that's it.
operate inside a resource constrained environment, we make excuses for the way that we view the world. And we scapegoat our inability to focus on the quality of decisions because of the time available. The answer, the antidote, is to slow down. And when we slow down, we focus on the quality of the decisions. So when I would go fly jets, I would have the end in mind. We would articulate what the specific objectives of every single sortie were. And I'll give you an example. We would say 4 up, 4 down. That meant that I wanted to take off 4 airplanes and I wanted to land 4 airplanes. That might not have been true in all conditions. There may have been places, if we were to fly into some of our near peer competitors, that we may have accepted 1 loss or 2 losses. So I may say 4 up, 2 down. But because I've started with the end in mind, when I come back and debrief, I focus on the quality of the decisions. So how do we do it? As we slow down, we begin to look at all of the contributing factors that got to either our success or contributed to our failure. What happens almost every single time when I go out and teach, coach, and mentor other entrepreneurs or leaders, entrepreneurs, I work with billion-dollar companies teaching this to their leaders. They focus on the most recent thing. They look for the item that caused the failure or the item that caused the success. And they put the blame. It's a bias. It's a heuristic. So again, it kind of digress just a little bit, but we put together our reality based on shortcuts. Our brain isn't smart enough to process all of these things, and we use these heuristic shortcuts to be able to make decisions quickly. And one of those heuristics is called a recency bias. So we look to things that are closer to our present, and we give them more weight. What we do in the fighter pilot world is we look at them neutrally, and we look at the one that had the largest impact on the success or the failure, and then we look to mitigate one thing. We want to fix that one problem, or we want to replicate that one success that led us to that outcome. So we're focusing on the quality of the decisions and not the outcome.
And when you look at things that way, Luke, we know this too. And that's the crazy part. I was just having a conversation with another executive from a company that we're looking to do business with, who I have a relationship with as well. And I told him, I said, I'm going to tell you what you already know, but you got to slow down. Like, you can't keep backing up meetings after meetings. I said, we're meeting up. You're running late to my meeting, and now you're running late to your next. What value are you getting out of any of these 3? Because you haven't even had a chance to debrief to get the value out of this conversation. So I told him, we're going to set up another one. We're going to take the 15 minutes we have left out of the 30 we had scheduled, and we're just going to catch up because we have a friendship. And I'm going to spend 5 of these reminding you that as another executive who I care about, you got to slow down. Less is more. But I'm telling myself this at the same time, right? It's so easy for us to help others and look from the outside in versus on the inside. But I think this is what is so important about sharing information like this and helping others, because we're constantly reminding ourselves and we're retraining and reteaching. But you're absolutely right. And I love what you're saying here. And this is not something I have looked at before. and I love what you're teaching right now, and that is looking at the quality of our decisions. I've never looked at it that way. And I love this. I absolutely love this because I could see the value in a debrief where we're not looking at right or wrong. We're looking at the quality of the decision made and then using that information to decipher what needs to be worked on.
That's right. That's right. And you know, somebody once asked me about if I would ever consider going back to work in another industry. And actually the answer to that is yes. I actually want to be the CEO of Disney. I'm actually interviewing for that. If you know anybody at Disney, I actually do want that job, and I will move to Orlando to go do that.
I do not. That is not a connection I have. Sorry.
Yeah, maybe a listener there lives down in Orlando. As I am interviewing for that position right now. Somebody said if I had to interview for a position in one sentence, what attribute would I bring to a company? And here's my answer. I make decisions that are 90% correct with 80% of the information. I don't seek perfection, and I get those decisions mostly correct. The other interesting thing, and I actually wrote about it this morning on social media, was how do you reconcile, if you're a high performer and you want to win, how do you reconcile a desire to fail to grow? We all know that we grow from failure, but how do you create the space in your life so that failure can occur and you can have a desire to win? And that's the great dichotomy. I believe that true peace happens when you can hold those two opposing thoughts in your head at the same time, giving equal credibility to both, but putting no weight on either.
Wow, that's powerful. And I think if more of us really embodied that, you know, that, and I love how you said like make the space for this, you know, and Rico, how you just said like to slow down. This is something that I have recently just been realizing myself, just like you said, like sometimes it's really easy for us to recognize it in other people, but I have been recognizing in myself like, wow, my calendar's way too full. I need to do what I tell my clients to do, and that is to black out space. Otherwise, I'm going to be making really poor decisions, you know, based on a lot of information. Luke, I'm going to be setting myself up for a lot of failure, and I won't feel comfortable with it either. So,
and to go to this, Lorianne, is, you know, in sales, I have taught and built sales teams for years. And one of the biggest things that helped us be successful and helped my teams be successful was my consistency in making sure that we understood the follow-up. This is just like what you're talking about right now, Luke, is you're talking about the quality of the decision being focused on, but most importantly, you only understand that and you can only talk about that in the debrief. So when you referred to what you were working on within the military and how you guys prepped, executed a mission, and then the time you spent on the debrief, that was the most important. In business, just like in sales, the biggest lack and the biggest issue is never the prep. We usually do a lot of good work. We get out there, we get in front of folks, we get our business noticed, but then we do nothing with it. Because we forget that half of the work, at least half, if not more, is in the follow-up. It's in the after aspect of what we're doing, just like in a mission that you would do, and just like what you're talking about now as you work with business leaders, it's in the debrief. And I think that this is so crucial. And so, Lorianne, to your point, not just in terms of making more room on your calendar, but being specific with a direction and an objective to give yourself time on the calendar to debrief, and then be able to walk through what like Luke's talking about, then look at the quality of the decisions you made. Look at the quality of the call. Look at the quality of the coaching time you had with a client. Look at the quality of the opportunity that you took advantage of, because sometimes, you know this in business, not every client's the right client for us. But if we're not taking time to debrief, we don't know that. And we're using resources, energy, and time into something that isn't benefiting our business, isn't benefiting us. Same thing with our personal time. Would you agree, Luke?
Yeah. So let's debrief that right there. So if we were to say sales process and we were going to stop and we go, why did we fail? That's the first failure, is that the majority of leaders only debrief failures. What does that do to psychological safety? It erodes it. If the boss comes to me and every time that he says, you got a minute, it's because I'm about to get my teeth kicked in, I don't like that anymore. So we have to debrief both the wins and the losses. And it's equally as important to talk about what went well. So if we go back to that recency bias, if you're teaching your sales team how to close better, and you were to debrief to them, the first thing that we have to do is we say, did we have a common yardstick? Did we have a shared understanding of what success would look like? Success could look a lot of different ways to a lot of people. So are we able to articulate that? If a closed sale is the answer, then we need to be able to understand that. But I would argue it might not be the answer. What about cash collected? What about the average lifetime value of the customer? What about your average order value, right? So when we understand what metrics we're applying.
Yeah, what cost of goods? The cost of goods, right? A lot of people forget that. Right?
You could close a sale and still lose money. So maybe it's profitability. But if as the leader, you have not yet articulated how we're going to define success, we are guaranteed to not hit it. So when I go back and look at it, I would say, let's debrief. And I'll give you a technique here. I'll tell you the 2+2 debrief process that I teach my leaders. When I go back and look at the quality of the decisions, I understand the biases, and I'm looking to beat down those heuristics that help them put their reality together. So when they go, well, I got him all the way to the close, boss, and he just, he didn't have the money for it. The financing wasn't there. He had to talk to his wife. All the normal closes and objections that we know. I say, let's stop right there. Let's look at the entirety of the process from the time the person didn't know us to the time that we closed the sale, which also, when you talk about sales, Rigo, we actually didn't lose that yet. We're still just in the process. That's a different story yet.
I agree. Yep.
We've got 6 more touch points that we owe that person before we actually are going to say that we close that as lost. Don't close those things out in your CRM. I want to look at the process. So I want to know, did we qualify the person? Was it an ideal candidate? Were they a good buyer? Did they have a needs-based analysis done? Were they in pain? Were they seeking a problem or a remedy to a problem or a solution? Did we qualify them? Did we stop and listen to what they were saying? Used car salesmen are the worst at this. You walk in there and they're like, hey, it's got heated seats. I'm like, yeah, but I'm worried about the steel in the door because I got an 8 and 6-year-old, right? I'll tell you. So when we look at the sales process, we go, what was it? And we want to look at each of those individually, holding them neutrally, giving credence to neither, and then we can figure out which one had the greatest impact on our ability to close. So I'm going to help them as the leader. And the interesting thing that you talk about is the debrief. Call it close the loop, after action, post-mortem. It doesn't matter what it is that you
It's all the same. It is all the same.
That's right. That's right. And if I am teaching a leader, we're going to debrief the debrief. It's your turn now to debrief me, but we're also going to put the same 10 minutes on the backside because it's my turn to debrief you.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. I love this debriefing. And I've always said the exact same thing, Luke. Like, too many times we think about and dwell on the failures or the things that didn't go well. And unfortunately, like, nobody ever says, like, hey, that project went really well. Okay, let's figure out what made it so well. Instead, we're just moving on to the next project. But I think debriefing needs to be, and I got to tell you, like, I don't see that as a topic in leadership books that often enough.
No, and I think a lot of times it's disguised under different elements. So let's think about, there's a compound effect. Why am I forgetting his name? Great book. Same thing like Atomic Habits with James Clear, right?
Yeah.
We as a society, and I think this isn't just a now thing. I believe that this is the human mind has a very difficult time because it's not tangible. There are the few that completely grasp a compound effect, and we know who they are. the Warren Buffetts and the Elon Musk. They're the ones that have already understood that it's a consistency of moving forward 1%. Recently shared something where I am coming to learn that you want to move consistently and you want to be ready to fail. In fact, you want to fail fast. You want to fail fast and forward. So the whole aspect is you get there quicker, make the corrections by understanding how to debrief, and then continue moving. And I think really, and I want your opinion on this, and I'd love for you to speak on it, but really what I'm hearing is, you know, if we could understand how things work in a compound effect, in the aspect that we're not doing less. In fact, from the outside, yeah, we've just taken 8 appointments in a 8-hour day or 10-hour day. We've dropped it to 3 or 4, maybe 4, but we're having such an impact on the front end and on the back end that are the quality of these meetings, these calls, these sales calls, these decisions for our business are becoming so much more effective that the end result, the quality of those decisions are better, that our business is growing faster. Our lives are seeing more impact in a positive area. We are feeling, like you say, more in alignment because we're being intentional with the aspect that we're intentionally preparing ourselves, going forward with the objective, but then we're intentionally taking as much time as we did to prep and execute to review the whole situation, to debrief it, to pull positives and negatives out. I think this is such a critical and crucial element for us to understand as individuals, just in general in life, not just in business.
Well, yeah, I started with that, Rigo. You know, the irony of that is that it only reflects you. Your business can only grow to the degree that you can handle it.
Yeah.
They are directly correlated. And I'll come back to that 2+2 debrief so that I don't leave your listener hanging
definitely.
there. But you know, the interesting thing, and I think Darren Hardy did a great job with the Compound Effect book.
Thank you.
But when we look at the challenges that we face as leaders, and I actually was flipping here in my book because I wanted to show it for those that are watching it live. Every single week I go through this, and this is the Full Focus Planner. It's a great book. I don't have any affiliate offers for you, but
no, I'm a Full Focus Planner guy too. It's sitting on my desk.
Yeah,
Love
right
it.
on.
Michael Hyatt.
He's so good. So here's the short story. I only accomplish statistically about 66% of the things that I set out to do.
That's actually pretty good, by the way.
Well, and that's
pretty good. Statistically, that's pretty good. You know this. Maybe others don't, but 66% is pretty damn good.
I'm wildly focused on it. Yeah. But it means that when I set out to go win the week, that if I don't have an understanding of everything that's on my plate and I can't operate from a prioritized list, I'm going to get 66% of the garbage done.
Yes.
And this is where we get distracted.
Busy work.
It's busy work. And left to our own demise, and again, this is brain science. You don't want to lose. You know that you need to lose, but what will you do? And this is what I talk to my staff about all the time. The first thing that I want you to do in the morning is nothing. I want you to stop and I want you to prioritize the day. And if it takes an hour of your time so that the other 7 hours are going to be wildly productive, that's A-okay with me. The worst thing in the world for you to do is get up, start working. The absolute worst thing for you to do is get up and start checking email. But that's a whole different story about brain science. So let's actually close the loop there on that 2+2 debrief cycle so that we can do something tangible to walk away from. What happens as leaders is that we get an emotional, ego-driven response when we get to failure. Why? I've already told you this. It's because you have a fear of inadequacy or fear of judgment. And as the leader, you don't like the inadequacy. That's fine. So you show up and you're frustrated. Park that right now. That's fine. You have an emotional response. Let's leave it there. If you cannot control your emotional response, the only thing that you need to do is you need to put time between you and the event. Just say, let's talk about it later. here's what I would say. Rigo, are you ready for a 2+2 debrief? Yeah, you bet. Let's do this thing. Here's why 2+2. I'm only talking about one thing I already know as the leader, the correction that I want to put into place. But I'm not going to overload my teammate by giving them so much garbage that they don't know what I really intended for them. So I'm going to start it out. If you can imagine, it looks like a square, 4 quadrants in the square. Top left quadrant says, what's one thing that you did well? And I wait for the response. They say, well, I think that I saw that, I got that sale to a close. I would say, yes. Now, bottom left quadrant, I'm going to give them one thing that I think that they did well. So in that bottom left quadrant, I say, yes, that was a great job on closing that sale. But what I thought that you did very well, and I'm going to be specific and articulate here, is I thought you did a great job in the qualification of the candidate in the first place, of that prospect in the first place. So yes, you got to the close, but I was more impressed with that quality of decisions that you made in the beginning. Second side, right side of this that's the first 2. Now we're going to do the 2+2. The second side is, what's one thing that you would have done differently, Rigo? And now this is where the magic happens in this micro debrief process, because if you get it right, we can call it complete. Well, actually, I didn't get the sale closed to the correct dollar value. We didn't make any money off of it, whatever. I'm just using your example. And then if that's the thing that I want to give input on, I would respond back, I actually agree with you. That's the thing that I was going to say as well. What I'd like to focus on is making sure that we work as a team together, that we slow down, that we make sure that we get the numbers right before we move to close. And if it's not, then I still give the feedback. But the point of that is I started out, 2+2, I started out putting you in a positive emotional state.
Yep.
I created psychological safety for you by letting you know that we're in this thing together. And I created buy-in from you because you're starting the conversation and I hear you.
You know what? And what I think too, what you're doing is you're getting permission, right? Donnie. Remember, we were out a few weeks. We obviously didn't check our batteries. But that's why we have a backup right there, which I like better.
Well, hey, while you're coming back, Rico, I want to talk, though. I see Anita making a comment there.
Yeah.
Can we address that real quick?
Absolutely. Let's bring it in.
Anita says, I've heard that you are the most impressional right when you wake up, and it's best to stay off your phone for 30 minutes to an hour after waking up so you can focus on yourself. Yes, I don't do it. I am a numero uno criminal. Why? Because I wake up every morning and I get into a meditative state. I use Insight Timer. I put on my Bose noise-canceling headphones, and I use that piece of technology. If somebody could get on an iPod Nano, I probably would do that as well. I do agree with you, Anita, but here's why.
Nano.
There's brain science behind that.
We're showing our age. Nano.
I know. So Anita, here's why this happens. There's truly some brain science about what happens. You got to take a look at alpha brain state, beta brain state, and theta brain state. And as you come out of your REM sleep cycle and you begin to move into those more active brain cycles, your brain is the most creative in that waking up state. So from a function of high performance, I would absolutely make the recommendation that you capitalize on that. If you've got a notepad beside your bed, if you've got to, send yourself a text message or whatever it is, but that's why there's science behind why you have your most creative times right before you go to sleep and right after you wake up. And now that you know that, if you can hold yourself in that state, you can be wildly creative for about 15 or 20 minutes in the morning.
Okay, this is important. So I just got something out of that. Give me the mental states again.
So we operate mostly in alpha, beta, and theta are the 2 brain waves, and you can take a look at them. It's science. It's not necessarily it doesn't matter what the waves look like. Mm-hmm. What matters is that you have an understanding of what happens as your brain begins to slow down and to speed back up. So we're in a very high state of awareness right now, which we aren't reserving a lot of creativity for ourselves. So when we get into the high performance world, this is why meditation is so crucial, is that as I slow down And in meditation, prayer, quiet time, walk, it doesn't matter. Don't fill your brain with all this high energy that we're giving you today. This is not your most creative state. Take what we're telling you today and go write it down, and then go take action on it later. But when we get into that meditative state and when we slow our brain waves down, that's where we reserve the right for the most creativity. Mm-hmm. So for me, that happens in the morning time. My morning routine takes 2 hours to get going. Before I ever set foot in the office, it involves drinking water. It involves sun salutations and meditation and reading. It's a long process. But by that
and that's because that works for you, right, Luke? And that's what you're saying is the morning and the evenings being the most creative state. You're not telling somebody they need 2 hours. You're saying you have found that morning time, that 2 hour time is impactful for you in what you do.
Yeah. And to your point, it's also not nap time either. So it just means that I'm not sending emails.
That's right.
I'm not going to waste that time. And if you're the type of person who enjoys that same time at night, I have an employee complete opposite side of the clock. She gets her most creative time at 1 o'clock in the morning when I'm snoozing for a couple hours.
Yeah.
But what you know about yourself as a leader, as a high performer, is that time that you have the highest creativity, whatever it is, that needs to be reserved for you. And you will be a better leader. You will be a better entrepreneur if you can carve that space out for you first, and you'll show up better for everyone else around you.
That is.
I'm just like you, Luke. It's my morning routine is sacred, and I do not like to alter it. But I'm the same way. And kudos to the people who are like those night owls who that's where their creativity comes from. Because I'm like you. I'm just like I'm snoozing.
Mm-hmm.
And to Luke's point, but this was one of the things that I had not totally understood. The mornings are important, and I have a morning routine today, and typically it involves a lot of conversations in the home and in myself, getting myself ready. And I'll be up for hours, but it's taken me years. I don't check my email anymore. I don't. It's taken me a long time to get there. I won't do it till I walk in the office. If I run my trainings, because we do a morning training, if I run it here, I still don't check till about 10:30, almost 11 o'clock. And I've made that a habit, even though I'm up at 7 and the team starts at 9, I'm not checking emails till 11. I won't do it. Why? Because it completely throws me off my focus.
Right.
And after running training for our clients and different folks, after running and getting involved, I have my own group that I'm a part of, and I get my coaching in right after. I come in and my mind is filled with ideas, and I can dump and put them down. I'll run in and I usually just tell Anita, here we go. And I'm just like, blah, and I just lay them all out. And she's sitting there typing it all up, and then we'll go back to it later. But the point is I have a lot of that creativity, and that's coming from the night before, where my mind is running with a lot of thoughts. And then I go to bed, and I usually have a meditation process to go to sleep. And I do that specifically, not just a process during the day, but I am pretty good at making sure that I have this meditation process to go to bed, because I need to shut my mind down. I'm a high performer. The evenings have always been big, but I didn't recognize what was happening in the morning. And so when I'm looking at the brain waves moving from the alpha, beta, theta, and I'm gonna dig into this because I love brain science. I love all things that are surrounding this, because I think it's so powerful to understand how we work and how we perform better. And it helps us explain why we make decisions the way we do. But that explains a lot. And I noticed that if I miss one of those, things are usually disrupted. Or if I break the habit, if I get in and I check an email, or I get on social media, or I do something of that in any way in those evening and the morning, I mess it up. And so here's one of the biggest takeaways that I've gotten from you, outside of some amazing notes, a lot of different points here that we're going to be going to. But the importance of understanding when we are in our largest creative space, that has to be sacred to us, and we have to protect that. We have to protect that. I think that that's an incredible piece of advice. The other thing that I've really enjoyed out of this is really understanding the importance of the debrief, and most importantly is in that process of being able to go through the quality of our decisions, not so much the pros and cons, but the quality of the decisions and what was the outcome from those choices made. Those are two huge elements that I've gotten out of this. I'm really glad that you came on today, Luke, and shared this stuff with us.
Me too. I've learned so much. I mean, one, you and I have been friends for a while, so I've actually learned a few interesting new facts about you. But I got so much, and I've got, a brain science and leadership background as well. But to be able to hear a lot of your unique thought leadership on like the 2+2, and really how to take the blame and shame out of problems, out of decisions, and let's stop leaders from pointing the finger, and let's just solve the right problems. Quality over quantity. This has been a great hour. Thanks, Luke.
Yeah, and Luke, I want to give you an opportunity now to share with us. Please tell us about your business. Tell us how you're helping folks. How can our viewers find you? How can they learn more about what you're doing and how they can reach out and have you help them if you're the right fit?
Yeah. So, well, first, thanks for having me on the show today, Rigo and Lori. And here's what I would tell you. It's not about me. My mission in life is very simple. It's to leave behind a trail of better humans. I start that by becoming a better human myself. I reap the benefits of it because I know that the universe mirrors me, and what happens in the environment happens because of the changes that I've made myself. I'm all over social media, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. Come find me. I'd love to engage with you. But here's what I would challenge the audience today. A lot of times that we hear these great examples of leadership and we hear about new philosophies, let's boil it down to one thing. As a leader, I want you to ask your subordinates, whoever you are, 5, 6, 7, 8 people, I want you to ask them what the most creative time in their day is. And then I want you to ask them how you can help them preserve that. And if you can do that one thing, I guarantee that you're going to be leading more effective teams with higher performing organizations.
I love that. I love that.
Awesome.
Yeah, thank you so much. So listen, you guys, I hope you enjoyed this today's program. I've been looking forward to it 4 weeks, and not 4 weeks, but 4 weeks. But anyways, I'm just thrilled. Luke, we would love to have you on again. By all means, I want to learn more about what it is that you're doing and hear more. I also think it's kind of crazy. You're the first person in all of our shows I've ever met that is actually using a full focus Michael Hyatt planner. So that's pretty cool. Most people are like, I don't get it. I'm like, right. So maybe there's more in alignment with us than I thought.
We'll tag Michael Hyatt in for the next one.
Yeah. I wish. That would be awesome. But anyways, I'm so grateful. Thank you very much. For those of you guys watching, let us know your thoughts. I appreciate that you continue to be here supporting us, and I hope that our program continues to bring you value. That is the purpose of all of this, is how can we bring more skill sets to you to become a better leader, a better parent, a better spouse, just a better human, just like Luke said. And we love this, and we want leadership to be contagious. That is why we have this program, and we want mentorship to become the new fad, right? That is our mission here. So anyways, we appreciate it. Don't forget, you want to be a part of this and let us know what you think. You can join our community by texting lunch to 316-799-8052. Don't forget to check out our YouTube channel, follow us there, make sure to like and subscribe so that way you get notifications. We usually do about 2 or 3 videos a week. We have definitely pushed it up. We put a lot of work into it, and we want to bring you guys value as much as possible. Lori Ann, my favorite, you are awesome, and I am so glad you're here hosting with me. Luke, again, thank you very much. We are signing off. Clock, you guys. God bless. Have an amazing rest of your week, and we'll talk to you next Thursday.